Like cooking, everything has a recipe.
A set of instructions to follow in order to gain a certain result.
Music is no different.
Be it ingredients for a dish, a set list for an amazing show,
Or a release strategy for a successful launch.
these are all recipes.
Hi, we're your hosts, Sean.
And I'm Brandon.
Come and join us in our kitchen as we go through the Music Maker's Cookbook.
Let's get cooking.
Welcome to the Music Maker's Cookbook, the podcast where we help independent artists cook up recipes for success in the music industry. I'm your host, Sean.
I'm Brandon.
And we've got a really awesome episode for you. If this is your first time checking us out, thank you for coming to our kitchen.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And if you've been here multiple times, I'm glad you like our dishes.
Yeah, thanks for keeping coming back.
Yeah, thanks for coming and dining in with us week after week.
There's some regulars in here.
We do have some regulars. Nice. So there's a couple interesting things that have happened between last episode and this episode that we're just going to kind of cover real quick. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might see in the camera shot that we've got some pretty mugs.
Woo. All official. Mine's dirty as hell. That's so embarrassing.
We drank from it.
We did.
Mine's cracked, so it's okay. We take really good care of our stuff.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. But yeah, one half of it's the Music Maker's Cookbook logo, and one half is each of our respective studios. Yeah.
Sean hooked us up with that the other day.
Yeah, talking about the importance of merch and having your branding on lock.
There you go. We're practicing what we preach, right?
Slowly but
how are
surely.
you going to have yours?
We've dinged this on our microphone.
We have.
like 5 times.
People are going to be like,
great.
this is terrible.
Yeah, just want to put that in there. If you're not watching this in the video podcast,
Then you can't see it.
Yeah.
But just know that there are mugs here.
Yeah, there's mugs here.
And they look cool, so you should go look anyways.
For sure.
I mean, I don't know. This is my opinion.
But no, today, as we said before, we got a good episode of the podcast today. It's going to be covering all about kind of preparing for your studio sessions.
Yeah.
We had an earlier episode, I believe it was episode 3 or 5, one of the two, that kind of talked about home recording and getting a good professional sound when you're starting making your own music. But now we're going to dive into, okay, you're going into a studio, you're paying for studio time. Let's get a great performance, be as productive as possible, and kind of talk about how to manage your time and get a fantastic overall experience going to the studio to get an amazing final song.
Yeah.
And Brandon and I, we each have plenty of experience in this.
We do. We do.
Being the engineers of it. And we each have a kind of an outline that we send clients before they come in of things to prepare, things to make sure they have down, questions that we want them to answer so that we can better prepare for them to be in the studio. So in the show notes or in the description of this podcast, you're going to be able to find the links to both of those.
Yeah.
So that you can
download them for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So if your engineer you go in doesn't have something like that, this end you can run through that kind of ours to make sure that you're on top, prepared, and ready to just knock it out of the park.
Definitely. Yeah. These are really important to have. It's nice to have a guide that will, guide you through this process, right? And you'll have like a little bit of a checklist, and you'll be able to kind of go through it as you go and make sure that you're hitting every point and make sure that you are the most prepared that you can be. And we will try to maybe update these if we ever come across anything. I know I definitely will on my end. We were just talking beforehand about a couple things, and I was like, oh, that's probably something good to add here, good to add here. So this might be a forever changing thing. So
What's the saying? Like, luck is preparation plus what's the other thing?
Timing.
Yeah. And so we want you to be prepared as possible so that you can have those lucky magical moments in the studio.
Yep. Because you can create your own luck. That's how you do it right there. Preparation meets timing.
Yes, you can. All right. So diving right into it, we're kind of each going to briefly run through the list that we send to potential clients, just kind of go over some basic things. We have some main big ones where you got to think of it before you even consider going to a studio, just some kind of basic things that you got to maintain to make sure you're ready when the time comes. I'll let kind of Brandon start off and jump into that.
Yeah. So more holistically, before you arrive to the studio, right? This is like going up to the day. You're going to want to take care of yourself. And kind of being adult about it, right? You want to make sure that you're getting a good night's rest beforehand, maybe even 2 days beforehand. I have a theory where the day before's rest doesn't affect you until the day after, right? So like, let's say I sleep bad yesterday. It's not going to affect me today, but it's going to affect me tomorrow.
I think there's legitimacy to that.
That's what I've heard.
Well, because like I go to the gym And whenever I do a hard workout, I don't feel it as hard the next day as I do 2 days from then. It's always 2 days down the line where my bodies are like, oh shit.
It like really catches up to you.
Yeah. So the opposite definitely makes sense too. Like prepare, take it easy, rest up beforehand.
Definitely. And I do really stick true to that. My fiance and I do. So maybe try to get a few good days of rest in there. Stay hydrated. Hydration is the key to, a lot of bodily health things. So try to maintain a good amount of hydration, because that really plays into the vocal cords and how well you're going to be able to sing as well. And overall, it'll eliminate any chances of headaches, just feeling overall just bad.
Yeah. Well, also, let's be real. Like if you're in the studio for a long session, you're going to be playing the parts again and again. You're going to be singing the same parts again and again, so you can comp it together and make that great take.
Definitely.
So
and that takes a lot of endurance, and you definitely want to be in prep of that. So yeah, you can start obviously hydrating multiple days in advance. I recommend to hydrate all the time. But realistically, leading up to the day, though, maybe be a little bit extra hydrated. This one's interesting. Try not to drink or smoke too much. If you do drink and it's like casually, like that's okay, I think, but I would probably steer clear of it, especially for vocalists too, because alcohol can play a big factor into it. And honestly, the effects that you feel the day after will sometimes negate that feel that you have, or it'll make you less susceptible to hearing the click or playing closer to the click or maybe locking in with the band better. So I would say avoid, drinking or smoking.
So here's the thing. Alcohol can, lead to dehydration, additional mucus, not music, dehydration, additional mucus, and that can all impair your vocal range and kind of cause it to crack. When your vocal cords aren't properly hydrated, they don't really work as well because they're folds. They need to be able to be lubricated and move, kind of like anything, like any mechanical joint. That's why you oil things. So that, don't get squeaky, don't get cracky. It affects your vocal cords, and it can even like dry out the mouth. And as you know, the guitar cab affects tone of the speaker inside the guitar cab.
I like where this is going.
Your mouth is the cab.
Yeah.
The way you are able to move your mouth and form around these words is what allows you to emphasize certain things. And especially if you're, a practiced vocalist, or you have a very unique voice where you move your mouth in weird ways to get kind of cool sounds in addition to your voice. Most top-notch vocalists are top-notch, are really recognizable because they're so unique in the tones that they create.
Exactly. Yep.
So you want to make sure that you can move it that way. You're not dried out. You're not causing your lips to crack and uncomfort by, as you said, consistently using your instrument. That's
great. And like kind of piggyback off of that, we want to use that same analogy of a guitar cab and a guitar head. The guitar head, if you're running like a half stack or something, that guitar head is your vocal box, your vocal cords, right? That is the tone you produce, right? And then like Sean says, you kind of go through your cab, and that is the means of getting that sound out to you, and how that plays into it is honestly one of the biggest parts, right? So definitely try not to mess with that all too much, maybe with drinking. I will say that there's a small caveat to the smoking part of it. There's this band out there called Amir. They've been around for forever now. And the lead vocalist, Frankie, he has a very gravelly, raspy scream to him, right? And I've heard that that's because of smoking. And like, it's actually a little bit more encouraged because you predict.
Oh, it definitely does that to your voice.
Exactly, because you get a little bit more mucus built up. And that is a part of the tone. But it's such a small caveat, right? That this wouldn't be applicable to a lot of people. But I imagine like maybe with some of the tenors out there or the crooners.
Let's talk about like even like Janis Joplin female vocalists that really scratchy, like that really gritty vocal to it. If that is your sound, it's your sound.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? but like we were kind of saying, like if that's your sound, that's your sound. But a lot of this sometimes it's not built into the sound, right? So this is for the people that it's not really built into. But if it is for you, then more power to you. Number 4, are we on 4?
It's your list.
I don't know. I've lost count. We're just going to say 4. Prepare the items that you're going to bring with you the day before or the night before. And like, honestly, maybe make an inventory list as well. This will help make sure that you don't lose anything or leave anything behind. Sometimes in the midst of things, when you're cleaning up during sessions, cables can be lost. That's probably like the number one thing is cables are left behind. A friend of ours, Luke, him and I always joke. I'm like, okay, so is it my turn to take something of yours, or is it your turn to take something of mine? Because we've both traded cables at some point. And this upcoming session, session with him probably here soon. It's
your turn?
It's my turn to take. So yeah. So, but yeah, so we always joke like, because like during our cleanups, it's just so hectic that we just are like, oh, no worries. We'll figure it out like the next day if we're missing something and we'll return it. So yeah, just make sure you bring a list with you. Make sure you're following everything. Make sure you have everything with you that you're going to need. And that's going to take a lot of preparation on your part too, like on the back end of things. Like if you know you're recording with a very specific guitar that day, bring that guitar with you, because like if you don't have that, you're not going to get the tone that you want, right? And like that's such a baseline thing. That's like, oh, this is common sense, Brandon, but you'd be surprised. This happens a little bit more than you think, because there's a lot of excitement leading up to the studio, a lot of nerves as well.
Well, so that's all true, but we're going to go more into that later. Let's kind of take a step back,
sure,
and just kind of finish off that it's important to make sure that you are in sharp mental and physical condition before you come into the studio, especially if you're on a budget or a time crunch.
Totally,
because you need to be on top of your game so you can make the most out of it before you go over budget, before you waste the time. So you actually have a product at the end of it. The worst thing is just to kind of be feeling slow and sluggish and only get 3 songs done when you needed to get 6 for your EP. Well, now you gotta wait another month to get your next page check to pay the next studio session, and the project's delayed or things like that. So it's important to first of all just take care of yourself as much as possible. Aside from that, we're going to go into more about all the details of things you can do to prepare and whatnot, but let's kind of set the stage beforehand.
For sure.
And kind of talk about the importance of like why it's really important to have effective time management, especially like if you're an independent artist and you're financing the whole thing yourself, especially if you're also paying for studio musicians or people to sit in and play on your song, or if you're the only one paying for the studio time, you don't have a label backing or anything, your time is money literally in the studio.
Yeah.
And it's really important to be as efficient as possible. And as we've said, we've been studio engineers for a couple of years. For me, 7, you 9,
something like that.
Yeah. So we've both seen good examples and bad examples of people coming in and spending their studio time.
And it took years to see that, right? Like you have to see the trends and kind of learn behaviors and see what works and what doesn't, and kind of like navigate from there. So it takes a while to kind of see these things and kind of point them out and know exactly how to prep for them. But sometimes it's like, it is common sense too. So it's got to lend itself to that as well at some point too. But yeah, so it's definitely an interesting ride for sure.
Do you have any like personal stories of good or bad sessions in the past to kind of say the positives of it? I got one.
Off the top of my head, I don't have anything specific. Usually the sessions do go pretty well. A lot of people are prepared. Like they'll have extra stuff in their car that they bring with them, or they'll already have been caffeinated, right? Or they've already eaten and like, or they got like a good night's sleep the night before or something. I have seen the opposite too, where it's like they're playing a gig the day before, then they got to come in and do vocals the next day. And it's like, that's usually not a great recipe for success, unfortunately, just because the vocal cords are tired, right? And like you used them a lot last night. And if you're playing for 3 hours or whatever, that's a long time. So kind of just like more general things like that. But what's your story?
Yeah, well, you just said, like, if you're playing the night before, it's kind of the importance of our last episode 20, where we talked about the seasons of 2 episodes ago, episode 20, where we talked about the seasons of music creation. You don't want them to overlap, because that's a great example of, if you're out there performing, you're going to have tired vocals when you come to the studio recording, and that could end up on your album and be there forever. Yeah, I just want to bring up, I got one client who his main thing is a vocalist. We kind of work together, get some references, compose a quick instrumentalist before he comes in, to lay his vocal on top of it, and we book a 2-hour session for it. Usually it takes only about an hour to 45 minutes for him to get his vocal take done. What that allows is for us to comfortably converse at the start of it and spend that time getting both of us in the right mindset.
That is so important.
Exactly. But he prepares his vocals, he takes care of it before he comes in. And being prepared for that allows us to take that time to both get in the mindset of it. It also allows us to then, when we're finished, have an hour left in studio that's, been paid for, that's good, that's already done. So we can either listen to it, be like, yep, this is good, we're done, decompress, build up that, working relationship, show me some songs, show him some songs. So in the future, we kind of have more of an idea of working together, because it's collaboration, especially when you're working with other, engineer in the studio. Or it allows us to be like, oh, let's try this, let's throw this in, let's do that. There's one song that we did that's now his favorite song that we've done, especially on this album, where we finished it and he's like, man, it sounds great, but the bridge is kind of incomplete. Let's throw the mic on and just have a kind of conversation like we normally do where we get like, energetic or into it. So we just recorded the microphone for like 10, 15 minutes. And there's one part where we just got, really into the conversation and got loud. And we ended up kind of throwing it in the back with reverb and muting it down and like putting it through like a tape machine and putting it underneath the bridge. So it's got that background sound to it.
That's cool.
And we chopped it up and made it to like emphasize certain parts of the instrumental during the bridge, and like it sounded really cool.
That's really cool.
We wouldn't have been able to do that.
I've only used samples for opportunities like that, unfortunately. So I never had a authentic ambient thing like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, we were only able to do it because we had an extra like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's his favorite part of any song that we've done. And, everyone that he's shown it to has like that stuck out to them too. It makes the song unique and something that can be talked about. And that only happened because he was prepared and was ahead of schedule. And we were able to then be creative in the studio without any pressure of, man, I got to get out of here. We still have 2 songs left. I only have 1 hour. There's no time to be creative. Let's just go, 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 go.
Those are the worst sessions, by the way. Like, it's not fun for either person. Like, I think like you hit a really big nail on the head that I want to go back and kind of touch on is that when you get in the studio, like you do have to have like a conversation, you have to have that warm up period. And skipping that feels almost too clinical and too transactional to me. I think it's fair to say that we are both human beings, and I would always expect I'd want somebody to talk to me, right? Like coming in first thing, like, what's up, new dude? What's up? What's going on with you? So that's really important. Second of all, is that those sessions that are like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. The end result is normally never as good. Never as good. And there have been slight moments where it has been as good because like maybe you need that extra discipline. You need that extra focus. Maybe sometimes, I forgot which law it is, but it's like the longer you have, the longer it'll actually take you, opposed to using that time efficiently. So let's say you have 8 hours or you have 4 hours instead of 8 hours. You might be able to complete that task in 4 hours originally, but if you had 8 hours, you'd actually spread that out over the 8 hours and not be as productive, right? So like there's that small caveat of that, but like overall those sessions usually never end up as polished as they could. I think you can tell that it's rushed.
Yeah, because there's not time to breathe. There's not time for reflection within the session. So if you can be as effective as possible, there's more opportunity to review what's actually happening in the studio. And then there's less pressure of, hey, let's get creative in here. Because most studios are built to be creative spaces.
Exactly.
It's not clinical. It's not come in, record your shit and get out. It's not Walmart.
Yep.
Get in, get your shit and get out. No, it's come in, let's get your stuff going, but have a good environment. Let's have a good performance. Let's feel in the flow state. Let's get creative. So, that's, one of the great positives and a challenge that a lot of artists face when they go into the studio is, being stressed about it, especially when the first time you go into the studio, it can be pretty stressful or you don't know what to expect. So the best you can prepare, the better you're taking care of yourself, the more effective.
Agreed.
It's going to be when you get in there.
Absolutely.
Which, speaking of, it's really important to do that pre-production work before you even book studio time to get ready for going in there. And that's kind of what you dove into, where I very eloquently, not abruptly, cut you off. Which go and do a checklist, make sure you have all of your gear, make sure you're bringing everything that you need, make sure it's communicated.
Definitely.
What you're going to bring and what you expect from the engineer. So like a lot of what I have in my email that I send out to clients before they come into the studio is things like, hey, are you recording to a backing track? I need that before you come in the studio so that we're not spending 10 minutes finding files and putting in the session.
Right.
Tell me what you're looking to record. Are you going to record just acoustics and vocal today, or are you bringing in a drummer? Because I want to make sure I have my drum mics ready or my drum kit set up so that we're ready to go and not wasting 30 minutes putting together a drum kit.
Yeah. Or that the live room's available that day.
Exactly.
Right? Like if you're sharing a live room with somebody.
So communicate that. Make sure, hey, when you use my guitar, or hey, do you have an acoustic in the studio that maybe I could use? Like, oh yeah, I got a Marshall. Oh, cool, we'll use that. Or oh, I got a Yamaha. It's a little bit too bright. I'm looking for singer-songwriter stuff. Oh, I got this Dean or whatever it ends up being.
And I have the ultimate acoustic, so
you do.
It just sounds so good. I'm sorry.
It is very,
I had to derail that because I just had to. I had to shout out my baby, my Martin over there, man. Shout out to you, man. Keep going.
Yeah, if people communicated beforehand, it'd probably be on more albums.
You know what I'm saying? Or it'd have the strings changed a lot more. So
no, but it's say, hey, this is what I'm expecting to do. Make sure that's set in stone, and that's most of what my email puts out forth. A checklist of pre-production work on your end, so you can be as prepared as possible. And communicate as much as possible so that they can be prepared, so you can jump into being creative right away.
Definitely. And mine also follows that similar trajectory, right? I think how we have ours outlined is a little bit different. I think I have a link to mine and then you have it in the email itself, but I make sure to kind of like highlight it in there, like go look at this guide. This guide is for you more specifically. And like kind of like what you were saying though, is like leading up to the studio day and like getting to the studio and being at the studio, right? One of the biggest things is like figure out your transportation too, because that can eliminate a lot of stress day of. You're already going to be kind of stressed out going to the studio because like you want to make sure that you hit all your goals at the studio that day, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's your first time, you're going to probably be pretty stressed, like very stressed. And the one thing that can make it even worse is sitting in traffic or not having a ride to the studio and you're scrambling to figure it out right at the end. Or the worst part as well is you're paying $40 for an Uber that you could have maybe avoided by asking somebody and seeing if they wanted to go with you to the studio or whatever the case may be, right? So now you're paying for it in other ways. We talked about this. I'm not going to say the word.
Even like directly, because most studios you pay for the time up front.
Yep.
So if you pay from 1 to 2 and you show up at 1:15, well, you still paid for those 15 minutes.
Yep. And you're not getting that back. It's non-refundable. Even if you show up at 1:52 and your time ends at 2, you paid for that whole hour now, and you have 8 minutes to do what you want to do. And at that 2 o'clock mark, maybe the engineer might grace you with an extra 10 minutes, right? But you're not getting more than that. I can almost guarantee you that. So,
especially if it's the middle of the day, because he's gonna want lunch.
Exactly.
Engineers get hungry.
They do, and hangry. And then also directions to the studio, like know where you're going too. Like if you have your own transportation, that's great. But like I was saying, you could avoid a lot of traffic that way. You could avoid, in our case, there's a railroad crossing by us that always has a train stuck on it every single time. You know what to avoid and how to get there quick, so that way you can be most efficient with your time. And then leave early, maybe that'd be cool.
Well, make sure your whole team knows that too.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to talk about the importance of
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to stack your recording session of what's the foundation of your song. Get that done first. You can then go play on top of it to get a really good performance.
Yep.
If it's imperative that your drummer is the first one to lay down the beat, so that your bassist, your acoustic guitars, your electric guitars, everything can then move with the swing of the drums. And the drummer doesn't know where he's going, so he shows up 45 minutes late. Well,
yeah.
And now what are you going to do?
And now he has to set up his own kit if he's bringing his kit, right? And like, if that wasn't communicated to the engineer as well, if he's bringing his own kit, now he got to move the house kit out of the way. And if the house kit was already mic'd, that's a waste of time. And like, see how it just like is a negative feedback loop and things kind of cultivate on top of each other. That's worst case scenario though, of course, right?
Yeah.
But that could happen. That's a possible scenario. So
and obviously there's ways to make a bad situation. You can roll with the punches. You can make a bad situation good. If you do require the drummer to have that kind of backbone to the song and you normally want to record that first, well, maybe you can still record a scratch guitar, or maybe you have an acoustic song that you want to just throw a quick demo out of.
Yep.
You're paying for the time, ways you can make it, productive regardless.
Exactly.
But now you got to do some mental gymnastics.
Yep.
Before you even begin.
And then that takes
creative.
people out of workflow state, right? Is like you have to think about it extra, so you're wasting a little bit more energy that you could have been using just if you had it right the first time. Another thing is too, this is really important, honestly, pack plenty of food, water, a laptop, charger, headphones, a phone charger, a portable gaming device. If you want to like fuck off in the corner while the vocalist is doing all his takes, like don't be a distraction, like go play the Switch or whatever you want. Like that's totally I've had people do it. It's totally valid. But yeah, I mean, just be prepared in terms of like consumables. If you want to go out to eat, which is very common, know whoever booked the session is most likely paying for that food for almost everybody, unless you have a really nice band that will Venmo you back, or you have an engineer that will Venmo you back. So just know that you might be paying for food if you take that route, and that's really expensive. But if you want a snack or something, like make sure you pack that. Like it's not guaranteed that the studios always have water available either. You could probably go get some from the bathroom, but who wants to do that? Bring your own water.
Or the kitchen.
Since we are in the kitchen. Not right now, but figuratively.
But that's a good point. I mean, like in my old studio, when I did a lot more recording than I do now, I had a setup where it was a couch, TV, and Mario Kart. So whenever it was just the vocalist or the guitar was doing overdubs or the drummer was like, we had to knock out a couple, different takes for songs or whatnot, the whole other band would just go off, sit on the couch and play Mario Kart.
Yep.
Which, is fun.
It's awesome.
It helps the time go by from them, so they're not just putzing around and, as you said, like making noise or whatnot.
Yep.
In fact, in the new studio location I end up in, maybe.
Ooh. Uh-oh.
There might be things cooking in the kitchen.
A little bit of a teaser.
Yeah, I might do that, something similar to that.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Because trying to get back into more recording
would
be fun.
Yeah.
But we'll find out. But Yeah, that's part of making sure you have the, right tools for you to, stay engaged or
Exactly.
out of the way, or whatever's best for the song is necessary.
Yeah. Let's see. What's next? We did kind of talk about having like session information prepped, right?
Yeah.
I just want to go back over it one more time since I have it highlighted right here. So all your basic session information should be prepped either on a USB drive or in an email or a Dropbox, or better yet, have both. Sometimes the email doesn't send. Sometimes you don't have access to internet, so you can't download from Dropbox, or sometimes the USB breaks, right? I don't want to talk about your iLock situation. That's terrible. I know. I'm sorry. But it just reminded me of when I said that. But, this should include basic stuff, titles of the songs. And if you don't have any, just do a working title for now. That'll work. And just make sure that you're synced up at the end with whatever you decide to name it.
Or go full 2000s and name it something completely different.
Yeah. I used to name songs after Pokemon, and then I used to name songs after hockey players. So yeah, and I never found a damn thing. So just know how you relate it and correlate it to each other. And then after that, know the keys of each songs and your tunings. That's really important. Please know your tunings, because if you're in some kind of weird 432 hertz tuning and you're slightly detuned from the standard 440, that's really important to know, because you will save a lot of aggravation in the long run, especially if you're using like tuning software later in the session. Like, holy shit, that can be brutal. Number 3, know the tempos of each song. Include your tempo map if applicable. Tempo maps are A+. If you know how to do that, kudos to you. That's awesome. But if you just know the basic feel of it, we'll just, as engineers, we'll typically tap it out in the session. It's not that big of a deal. And once we tap it out, I'll have the artist play with it. I'm like, does that feel right? Too fast, too slow? The three, what is it? The Goldie Bears, the Goldilocks, or the three bears, Goldilocks and the three bears or whatever. Is it just right? Too fast, too slow? And then we'll figure it out from there, right? So that's not as pertinent, but just kind of know. And then the last is know the lyrics of your songs too. I think that's kind of important too. I guess this isn't the last one. I have a couple more, but have the lyrics with you just in case, if you want to rewrite anything, or if you don't know them off the top of your head, it'll be advantageous having them.
Or if you have a session backing vocalist or someone else adding harmonies to it, you can then just give them the lyrics so that they can follow along, listen to the melody a couple of times and then match it with what the words are, versus having to then try to memorize or write down the words that you tell them. And it's better to just kind of have a copy of that.
Definitely. And then even so, if you have the engineer there, sometimes he'll want a copy too, because doing very intense vocal production might lend itself well if he has the lyrics, maybe put more emphasis on this word since it's right after this clause or a phrase or whatever. So that's important to have too. Let's see. Wet, dry stems, wet, dry multi-tracks. I would send both, in my opinion. If you have a demo, send everything that you have the correct way, and you might have to look that up for your specific DAW. Sean and I have gotten sessions before where things are totally out of line and unusable. Or you're going to be sitting there for hours trying to put it back together, right? So learn how to do that if you don't know how to do that, but also export them both wet and dry. I think it's advantageous to have both, even though you'll probably lend yourself to using wet more so than dry.
Opposite in my opinion.
Oh, really?
I think I end up using the dry stems in the session more so than the
Gotcha.
wet. Wet is great because it gives you an idea of the effects that this is an engineer's perspective, in my opinion. Wets are great to have, and wet just means that the stem or the track has the effects on it.
Yep.
So if there's a reverb, the reverb's on the acoustic in the wet. There's no reverb on the acoustic in the dry. So in my perspective, wets are great because I can see it's a room reverb. So they want it to be more of a room space, more intimate kind of vibe. Or, there's a lot of reverb on this, so we're going to go full ballad or, church orchestral, whatever it's going to be. Or same with flange or delay, or what are the effects that they have that can now be duplicated in the studio in the whole mix.
Yep.
And the reason I usually stick with dry after that point's done is let's say you've recorded as they have a bass player who lives out of state, but he recorded a bass line to a click that you then want to use in the session as the bass line for recording on top of it. I then want to be able to do similar effects, but also tweak it so that it fits better in the mix. Or if you have a acoustic track somebody did that you want as the foundation, I want to be able to then match the reverb with the rest of the instrument so it sounds like one cohesive space, more glued together, not separate. Or let's say, this is a really nice reverb, but it's in series. I want more of a parallel kind of reverb effect. It just allows the engineer more flexibility and allow more options for communication with, what's the end sound going to be? That being said, most of what I do is acoustic instruments, mixing and mastering of that. And it's mostly folk, rock, acoustic bands, that kind of thing, where the whole point of it is to kind of sound lively and sound acoustic. I don't know, like energetic, noisy, that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to, like, the whole goal is to make it kind of put it in a space, kind of,
right,
so that it fits together and you have that more powerful push, that glue to it. A lot of what you do isn't necessarily, I'm speaking to Brandon, by the way, not you necessarily. Hello. A lot of what Brandon does, he does that as well.
Yeah. Yep.
But also he does a lot of hip hop.
Definitely.
And for that, you know, I would assume having wet stems,
it can be advantageous.
Can be very nice.
Yeah. Because, like, let's say you have this guy that sends you a beat that he made, and he has a reverb on a pluck, right? That's very specific. Like, I'm gonna want that reverb on there because that's how he had it dialed up in that song, and I don't want to take that and ruin it for him, right? And make it something that it wasn't. I want to keep it this exact same way that he had it. Now for vocals, most of the time I will use a lot of dry stems just to have that flexibility later on. But if there's like specific like effects on there, like there's like a distortion effect or something cool with like a delay or like a deep voice, I'll keep that. Like I'm using that because, like, at that point I'm like, what am I going to do that much differently, right? Like, if you already like it the way that it sounds, let's just run with it, dude. So definitely points, I think, on everything like that. You know, it's like, if it's more like electronic-y based, like, I tend to keep the wet stems a little bit more. If it's more real, bad way to say it, but if it's like more lively or whatever you want to call it, then I will lean towards the dry stems. And then I think this discussion right here highlights why it's important to send both, right? Is like this right here, because everybody has a kind of like a philosophical difference on how they work with this stuff.
Well, also this highlights the kind of the advantage of going to a studio and collaborating with, you know, professional engineers, people who think about these sorts of things of like, okay, well, how is it going to affect the final sound? What are you going for, and what is the best use of what you supply? And also being like, hey, I have these stems that I would like to send you so we can prep it for the session when I come in, and then having that conversation of like, okay, cool, this sounds dope. Maybe these vocal backing track stems that you have, might need to redo those, or some, you know, crunchy in that, noise in that, or hey, we got to redo this, or try this out, or have you thought about throwing this in? You know, the advantage of working with people in the studio is that a lot of times what they do 24/7, and they're thinking about and they have to deal with how things are composed and layered all the time. So you can have these kind of conversations and have that collaboration of what works, what doesn't. And if it's a good engineer who's been doing it for a long time, then especially if they have, you know, accreditations or whatnot, potentially they know what they're talking about and they kind of know what sounds good. And you can have that thing of conversation of like, that doesn't quite fit. Let's try it with this way. Or, oh, that's clashing with the bass. What's more important to you? Do you want the low end piano information, or do you want the higher, low mids of the bass to be poking through? What's more prominent for you?
Definitely.
And can have that kind of creative thing, or, oh, hey, it sounds kind of hollow here. Let's try to add something in there that fills it in, be it pitch correcting the vocal, to add layerings to it, add harmonies, add a new synth part, whatever it may be. It's a collaboration process. It's not just you record me, make me good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The advantage of working with a person is it's a person. And especially if you talk to them and pick the right engineer, which we talk all about in episode 5, how to source the perfect audio chefs, and you have a good vibe together, then you can really make some cool shit happen.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's a wonderful point. Collaboration is key, right? So that being said, I think I have like 2 more things on here, and then I'm good on my end.
Killer.
I mean, in my guide, I do want to preface this. We're not going to go into each individual instrument or person, right? Because we'd be here for 2 hours talking about that. So if you want to learn more about your respective instrument, you can download the guide for free on my website. I think that's probably where we're going to host it, on our websites.
Yeah, on our individual websites, we'll have links that will tag you to the correct ways of downloading it.
And I have that highlighted through here, like I have vocal preparations, drum preparations, and all that good stuff. So if you're looking for something more specific, you can go check that out there. But as more general things, 2 more things to add. Number 1, please make sure that you can play each song to a click. Even though you might not be using a click if you're playing together, which, I mean, I think you should still kind of like revolve around a click at that point anyways.
Caveat,
Depending on how you play, I guess, though.
Yeah, like if the whole purpose of the song is we just want one take.
Yeah.
And this is the recording of a live performance, like a jam band or something like that.
That's when the click becomes honestly useless.
Yeah, more obsolete.
Yeah.
But maybe have a click at the start of it so you at least have a consistent starting tempo.
You have a count off. Yeah.
Yeah, and count off and all that.
Definitely.
But if you're like adding, like doing recording drums after the vocals, after the guitars, after the, you want to click so it's easy to.
Yeah. And especially if you're adding MIDI instrumentation too, like that can be a pain in the ass without a click. And you can have the engineer go through and actually find the decimals, but then that's extra time, which could mean extra cash from you. So just be diligent in your practicing and just practice to a click. That's really all I'm asking.
And even if you don't use it in the studio, it is such an important skill to have. And also knowing what the click of your songs is such an important skill to have, because it's very important to be able to give sitting musicians that information so they know what kind of speed to practice at. Or if you use a click backing track that on live, you can then tie your light show to it or whatnot. A lot of times, the bigger you get, the more things you incorporate. The easier it is to add these things if you have a consistent MIDI or not a consistent click that you perform to. So it's just such a good skill to have.
Exactly. Great points, though.
I know when I started playing guitar, was the first instrument I learned. I had a teacher who was like, you have to play to a click. Here's the metronome. You got to play to the metronome. Play to the metronome. I fucking hated doing it.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's not fun.
No,
it's not fun at all.
No, not when I was 7.
Yeah, but it's so advantageous. And you know what? You don't have to do it for 3 hours a day. Like maybe some of the really big guys do. Like I know there are people that go to these conservatories or whatever they want to do, and they practice for like 8 hours a day. But that's like what they do, right? You don't have to do that. 30 minutes a day. Put it on, see if you're getting any better with it. Take it up a notch if you want to. But that's really kind of going into each individual instrument. Don't want to do that.
It's just a skill.
Just a skill to have. Lastly, if you want to use samples in your track, two things. Make sure they are cleared for legal use. Okay. I've gotten a lot of sound effects from movies. That's a no-no, unless you want to go buy it, which good luck getting a hold of them in the first place. Number 2, I don't send me the bill, because that's going to be expensive, most likely. And like this also goes for instrumentals too. Like if you're using an instrumental off of YouTube or whatever, make sure that it is for free use or you buy it. And even that free use one can be very interesting depending on how it's termed. So you need to like make sure that you're using it for the correct reasons. If it's commercial, then you're usually pretty good. I'm not a lawyer. Go look it up. This is not legal advice, but usually if it's commercial, you're pretty good. If it's for personal use, that's a whole nother can of worms. So make sure that you're clearing that and everything's good to use, because it would suck to waste your time in the studio and not be able to use that song, especially if you really like it. Number 2, make sure that they're in WAV file format. Yeah, you can get away with MP3s. That's fine. But honestly, the higher resolution usually means the better outcome at the end. And this usually means maintaining a minimum quality of a 44.1 kilohertz sample rate and then a 16-bit bit depth for the sound itself too. That's like basically minimum requirements in the studio. That's
the standard.
Yep.
And the reason we say that is just to quickly go over the difference between a WAV file and an MP3 is if it's a high quality MP3, they sound very, very similar.
Very similar.
Most people can't tell the difference. But what a WAV file is it's just a lossless WAV file, which means there's no compression, no simplification of the data to make it take less space on your hard drive or whatever. It is the full accurate reproduction of the digital audio waveform.
Yep.
What MP3 does is it's a compression format, which takes away certain parts of the numbers in like the coding of the
rounds them
audio
off.
file, rounds them off, simplifies things so it takes this large audio file and makes it into a smaller file. Now, back in the 2000s, the late 90s, when this really digital sharing of music first picked up, it was super important to do that because you couldn't store a whole lot. Nowadays, it's easier to get things in WAV. It's easy to get things without compression because we got a lot more data. Now, as we said, the main difference between WAV and MP3 is one's lossless, one's compressed. Just to kind of visually kind of get that point across, it's kind of like the difference between watching a Blu-ray movie at 1080p or 4K versus putting in a DVD that's at 480p or 720p. they're both a movie. You can tell what's going on, but some of the lines aren't as sharp on the film. You know, some things look a little bit blurry, especially in the distance. There's not as much depth. Colors might not be as vibrant. Yeah, that's the information that is taken out when it's compressed in MP3, where you can still tell it's the song, but it's the little details that really add up.
Definitely. That
are now missing. Yeah. So if you can get a wave, get the wave.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
or FLAC.
Yeah, that would work too. Yeah. Yeah. Any lossless version, really. That was a beautiful way to say that. I mean, I don't have nothing to add. That was gorgeous.
Man,
and that's because you said it in a WAV file format. Terrible joke. That was really bad.
You want something really funny?
Yeah.
So when I edit the podcast and I put the audio in on the video, I use the MP3 bounces from Pro Tools because it allows me to render the videos faster.
Gotcha.
So, you know, not really practicing what we preach.
Wow. So we must.
But spoken word is not the same as music.
It's not.
It's not. In fact, the vocal range is a lot less. Like you want a full range spectrum when you have the bass and then the cymbals and the highs and the shimmering.
Exactly.
A human range is
doesn't really follow the same rules. Doesn't really follow the same spectrum.
I can be
outline.
Lazy.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Dude. Yeah, dude.
I'm fine.
Whatever, man.
Don't laugh.
Nobody even knew. Nobody even knew. So that's really, I think, all I have on my end. Like I said, I go into each individual instrument preparation, but outside of that, those are my general tips.
Yeah, Brandon's guide is a really good guide to look to just kind of refresh and make sure you're really up to date. He goes through a lot of different kinds of instrumentation, and it's very detailed. So I highly recommend going to his page and downloading that.
And you know what? I have to say this because I just noticed it. We're recording on October 11th today. The last time I updated it was October 11th, 2022.
Damn.
So it's exactly 1 year old from when I made it.
Anniversary.
Yeah. So happy. Wow. That's serendipitous.
Yep.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Next thing we're going to kind of cover real quick is just being aware of certain recording techniques that are going to happen in the studio that aren't necessarily how you're going to be rehearsing things.
Yeah.
To get a clean, crisp, clear sound. There's a lot of things that engineers will do in the studio that, as I said, are very different than you normally do a practicing or rehearsal. So it's best to kind of be aware of them so that you're not necessarily shocked when you go into the studio and you have to readjust how you perform, because there's a lot of things that go into making a really good performance. Now you're not just performing in a room. Now you've got a bunch of mics in front of you or cables going around. And like if you're recording acoustic guitar, you're going to want to be as still as possible so that the difference from the mic is consistent.
Yeah.
And the setup is the same.
Great point.
Yep. You're not going to be able to move around or groove as much because that's, we're looking for that perfect, crisp, clean capture of a performance.
Yep.
So maybe not be able to move around. That's one thing that happens in the studio.
Yeah.
Another thing is if you're a drummer, if you have your drum cymbals close to your kit when you perform, you're going to want to practice having them further away from the kit, especially if you're going into a session and this kind of music you do, it's good to spot mic the drums.
Yeah.
Because now you got to fit a microphone between your tom and your crash and your tom and your ride and, the snare and the hi-hat.
Yeah.
To be able to capture that source, especially the snare and the hi-hat. If there's not a way to put a mic there, then it could hamper the quality of capture.
Definitely.
So if you can practice spreading out your kit, also other techniques, sometimes they'll put towels over drums or pillows inside of it, or certain things like they'll tape up certain strings on the guitar so they don't ring out when they play the guitar.
A lot. Yep.
Yeah. So these are some things that are kind of intrusive to the way you play.
Most definitely.
But definitely come through in a cleaner capture.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of techniques that you're going to be introduced to for the first time in a studio. So
yeah,
be aware of that.
It's sometimes it can be very unnatural if you're not used to these kinds of things. Like Sean was saying, the cymbal height is a big one because if you back off the cymbal height and you raise the cymbals up a little bit more from your toms, you help reduce bleeding that way. If you're spot micing the toms too, that can be very advantageous to the overall drum sound. I mean, the funniest part is a lot of the time the spot mics on the drums aren't what really make the drums. It's the overheads and stuff like that too, so it's but it's a culmination of these things too, right? So you need to make sure that you have these, that you're prepared to deal with these sort of things in the studio that give you the best overall result. And like Sean was saying, another one is taping the top of your guitar nut. That one can be very intrusive, especially if you're playing 2008 metalcore and you're using the first fret for your death chords and shit, That's something to kind of get used to. And sometimes the sustain isn't as good sometimes too, because like if you have an open note, right, maybe the sustain might actually fall off a little bit quicker if you're using something like that. Generally though, you can avoid that, especially if you tape up above the nut, because like some noise can happen up there too. But that is something that you kind of got to get used to and prep for. There was another thing that I was gonna piggyback off of you for. Oh, when recording acoustic guitars, I don't make people do this, but I do it myself when I'm recording for other people, when I'm like doing like session musician stuff. I will wear a mask when I'm recording acoustic guitar, like an N95.
Yep.
So I don't breathe into the microphone, or at least it will help reduce it a lot. It's the worst taking those out. And if you can hear it, it's just such a ruiner, especially if it's very intimate. If it's a very intimate song, there's not a lot of dense instrumentation or arrangement around it. So I will wear a mask myself. I don't make other people do it, but I do wear a mask to have that extra 10% on the recording, right? And to try to like minimize anything that might cause obstruction later. So a little cool tip.
Yeah.
I never tell anybody that. Everybody's always so surprised when I put on a mask when I do acoustics. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, it helps.
I'm cutting the voices out.
I'm cutting them out, dude.
No breaths.
Yeah. You can't hear me breathe with my loud nose. Like that's loud.
Yeah.
Sean just turned it up.
No.
For you guys.
I don't have to.
You should.
I don't have to.
You should.
There's quite a bit of you can hear the breath.
Oh, can you?
And the breathing.
Maybe I should back off
in these podcast episodes. No, it's from me too. It's fine.
Can you hear this?
We're not doing ASMR.
Damn it. Can make some extra money.
Yeah.
That stuff's crazy.
Moving on to the final part we're going to talk about today, from breath to, but yeah, just, man, the breathing, I'm thrown off again.
I'm sorry.
I'm so easily thrown off.
I'm sorry. It's because it's me.
But it's not a bad way. I'm just like rambling now. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are techniques that you might not be familiar with in the studio, and you're going to be able to be more comfortable with it the more you go in the studio, the more you work with the engineer. You're going to be able to sort some things out. It's also good to communicate beforehand of like, now that you're aware of them, hey, I don't use the 6th string when I strum or whatever in this song, and when I finger pick. Oh, cool. Well, we'll just tape it down then. Ways to communicate that.
Totally valid.
Exactly. Just great things to be able to converse about beforehand. But the last thing we're going to talk about is kind of some quick time management strategies, some things you can do to really make a studio efficient and take up as little time as you can, so you have that time to be creative, you have that time to breathe, and you don't feel super rushed, because it's easy to get anxious and have perfectionism in the studio and want to go again and again and again. But there's some things you can do to really keep track and be on top of having a good session. A quick one that I like to talk about. This is really bad. But a quick one is kind of knowing what the foundation of your music is and what the song was built around, or what supports the whole song. Because like if the song is supported by the acoustic guitar and the drummer and the bass kind of follow that as the lead, then you're going to want to record a acoustic guitar part first. At the very least, a scratch part first, so that the drummer then knows when to hit things, when to start. And even if the drums are a foundation, it can be really important to have a scratch acoustic or a scratch vocal, so that they can follow along and emphasize the correct parts versus just playing to the click where they don't know where they are, have to memorize the whole thing. Like, oh, I did 4 measures of this, time to move on, time to this. So knowing kind of what the foundation of the song is can be really important. And you normally want to build kind of from the bottom up.
Yeah.
So if the drums are really important in the song, then you want to record the drums, so that then the bass can play to the drums, and then the piano can play to the drums, and the guitar can be redubbed over the drums, and have that whole rhythm make it really tight together.
It eliminates your need of the click at that point, right?
Exactly.
It helps reduce that each step, and that can be very advantageous to the overall benefit of the song itself.
Because I know this as a musician, you know this as a musician. It's when you play with somebody who you can follow along with and really vibe with, it's the easiest thing to do. And it gives you more confidence. You fall more into the song and get lost in getting that flow state and get the great performance out of it. So what is the thing, like who follows who? The bass player probably follows the drummer. So if you can have the drummer solid and that recorded first, now you can get a better take out of the bass player. The guitarist follows the bass. So, and the rhythm of that, the up and down of that. So then you get the guitars in, layer that up. Then the vocal comes in because, you know, maybe the keyboard emphasizes things and like goes, like falls back and pushes forward with the vocal. So then you record the vocal next and then the piano afterwards so that then he can kind of move with the vocals. Like talk to your band. How do you communicate musically? Not necessarily how do you talk, but how do you communicate musically? So you can emphasize that in the studio, get the best performance and get the musicians out of their heads, get you out of your head and just fall into the song.
Yeah, definitely.
Because everything we talked about, preparing, make sure you got good quality gear, good quality just all these techniques for studio recording. It's very, very important, but it really falls secondary to having a killer performance and being able to communicate within the recording process to get the best performance. That's a great way to save time.
Yeah, and
it takes less takes when the performer just falls into it and gives that performance.
Exactly. Pro tip too: if you want to do scratch tracks on your own and you have the capabilities of doing so, do them and make sure that they're good, but you can take your time on the scratch tracks and you won't have to use studio time for that. In fact, your engineer might thank you for it. Be like, yep, you have the scratch tracks? Cool. Let's start laying the drums down. Because you're there to record the drums. Yeah. You're not there to record a scratch track. You already know what the song sounds like. You might as well just do it on your own. Be prepped, send it to your engineer before the studio session. Get right into it.
Yeah. And
that'll save yourself at least an hour.
And if you're good at recording to a click and even just using it on your phone, even if it's just a phone thing. Yep. So it's recorded to a click, just import it, we'll line up the first note and the rest of it's good to go.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to have quality, it's a scratch track.
Yeah. And then that scratch track, your drummer can practice too beforehand, and even better because then you're knocking out a drum take maybe pretty fast, depending on how the drummer does, right? Yeah. So, and if he used all these other tips too, he would have an excellent day and you might save yourself some substantial time.
Yeah. Same with scratch vocals or just anything that, as you said, like as you communicate with the band, what gets the best performance out, who follows who, anything you can provide in front of that to make that easier to get a great performance.
Yep. Bonus.
Yeah. If you can record it and supply it to the engineer, it just makes it so much easier.
The returns are worth it.
Yes.
The returns are worth it.
Come in, be creative, knock it out, and just have way more fun doing it. So on top of that, kind of important to discuss ahead of time, like, hey, what's the deadline of the session? How long can we go? Though sometimes engineers have a very hard line stance of when it hits 7, I'm done. And it's good to know that because if you're in the middle of like, you're feeling it, you're in the energy, oh, let's try this, let's get that going. 7 o'clock hits, session's over, gets up, walks, okay, everyone leave. Yep. It can be a buzzkill if you don't expect that.
Exactly.
So knowing, hey, how long do we have? What are we going to record? And also a huge part of being effective in the studio is also communicating when the deadline of this song is supposed to be. Like, hey, we're looking to release this in a couple months. We're looking to, this is our whole project. Communicate that in front of time. So that way the engineer can help you with, okay, cool. Well, let's prioritize these songs first. Then we're going to make sure these people are all in it. Make sure you communicate with the band that these guys need to be here on these days. Otherwise, I can't help you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, another good thing to add on top of that is I had my good friend Eric in the studio last Friday. He was up from Nashville and we were talking later because we had like 2 goals that day. We wanted to either do acoustic versions of the songs that he has coming out on his album soon, or we wanted to do videos like how I've been showing you those in studio videos. And we were both like, okay, what do we want to do first? And I was like, what's more important to you? What's more important that we get done? Because he's here for a limited time. And sometimes just asking yourself, what's more important, or you telling the engineer what's most important to you will help guide you on where you go with the session. It's really as simple as that. What do you want to get done? So Kevin's great at it too, by the way. We mention Kevin all the time, but sometimes Kevin will come and he's like, I want to finish this, that. And we're like, okay, cool. Let's go.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Because like you just made my life so much easier because now we don't have to see her going, oh, what are we going to do next? You know, so he already knows that's what we're going to do. And if we don't finish it, we pick back up from where we left the next time. So
last thing I'm going to talk about for time management strategies is kind of removing as many distractions as possible in the studio. Put your phone on silent.
Yeah, big
and
one.
even better, set it aside. Leave it in the hallway or on a table outside of the room or whatnot, so that you just don't have that risk of your phone going off or you're not distracted to scroll Facebook and I heard some bad news and I'm out of the vibe.
Or interference. Picking up interference in a take, that'd be terrible.
Yeah.
You get the take and your phone's buzzing. and the shielding isn't great and it's still coming through, and all of a sudden you have in the background of whatever, and it's like, oh, this sounds terrible.
Now you gotta do it all over again.
Yep.
So anything you can do to kind of stay focused and limit distractions, it's another huge plus. Kind of sad just throwing in at the end because that's a big thing. But yeah, that's a really quick and simple thing you can do.
Yeah, definitely.
Just keep the phone out of the studio or in control in the studio. At least put it on silent. Maybe put it like do not disturb, airplane mode, whatever you can do.
Yeah.
And keep it away so that you don't doom scroll during a session because you're paying for the time.
Yep.
But yeah, so just kind of, I think that's it.
I think I want to add one more thing real quick.
It's not it.
Bringing people with you to the studio. Be selective on who you bring with you. Know who's going to distract you, and know who's actually going to be of benefit at the studio. Right?
Yeah,
sometimes you might
beef with the bass player's girlfriend. Don't let him bring his girlfriend.
Exactly. Usually, and I'm not a huge stickler. Like, I don't care if you bring your significant other to the studio. Usually I'm pretty good about, a lot of people have hard stances on that. They say no. I don't care. Like, I think it's cool. Sometimes it's cool just having extra ears in the room, especially somebody that you can trust. But like, if it becomes a distraction, I have had bad experiences though with people bringing significant others. I won't go into the details, but it's a great story. Should I tell the story? We're running out of time.
Yeah, we'll hold that.
Maybe another time. But it was a great story though.
In fact, if you want to hear the story, Brandon will just kind of record a quick 60-second video of it, and we'll put it on our Instagram and TikTok.
Maybe Sean and I will reenact it together. That's bonus content.
Bonus. So yeah, check us out on our socials so you can hear the story. There's exclusive content on our Instagram and TikTok.
That's right. But yeah, so just know who you're bringing and whether they're going to be a deterrent or they're going to contribute or they're going to remain neutral, which is also valid in my opinion as well. Even if they are going out and getting lunch orders or whatever, that's really cool. That's a great thing. That's a big benefit. Right? Yeah. If they're a team player, awesome. If not, maybe consider not bringing them. That's my only thing with the distractions.
For sure. But anyways, yeah, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Really hope it was exciting and helpful for you. I feel like it was a nice one.
Yeah, I just told people not to have friends, so that's pretty much what I gathered through that.
Be a loner. No, don't do that unless you want to. I don't know. I'm not gonna tell you to live
that's
your
up
life.
to you.
I can tell you how to live your life. Yeah. But yeah. So basically, as we just kind of covered, you're paying for your studio time. Be as selective and put as much effort as you can into it, as reasonable, rehearsed and whatnot, so that you can have a fun, productive time there, get the best take possible, that you can create an amazing sounding song that you can then put out into the world.
Yep.
So this is kind of the way to do it. You can download Brandon's kind of sheet on how to prepare for the studio, or you can download my sheet. As we said, they're in.
Or both.
Why not? Compare notes. Maybe I've got some things that he does. Maybe he definitely has some things that I don't. Like good looks. Anyways.
Oh, stop.
So you can check that out. Watch the video. You'll see him turn to a tomato. So yeah, you can check that out there. We've got some awesome topics coming up, so make sure to tune in next week. In fact, episode 25, we're going to kind of do a review and recap. Because 25, that's a half.
We have the test coming up at 30. We're going to test y'all. No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, we're almost halfway through a year, almost 6 months, which is insane. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you want to give us feedback on this episode or past episodes, or give us future topic suggestions, you can DM us on our socials. You can leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can message us at podcast@musicmakerscookbook.com. Speaking of which, if you are listening to this on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, please follow, give us a like, subscribe, review, send this to another musician who you think could benefit from it, because we're all trying to make a living and doing what we love, and it can be really hard to do. So giving this, if it helps you, if you can help more people, that would help us as well. So win, baby.
Ooh, triple wins, man.
With that all being said, thank you for joining us in our kitchen today.
Thank you.
Time for you to go out and get cooking. Until next time.
Bon appetit.
Woo!